Hi, I'm Michelle Begue with a look at what's happening in Latin America now. But first, our news trivia. What country with a war on gangs inspired a new video game? We'll have the answer later. Chile will try again to draft a new constitution, but this time the right-winged parties are leading the way. This weekend's Chileans voted for advisors to draft a new constitution. My colleague Joel Richards has more.
The far-right Republican Party, led by former presidential candidate José Antonio Cast, swept to victory in Sunday's elections, taking 35% of the vote. The traditional right won around 20%, giving right-wing parties absolute majority in the council, elected to draft a new constitution in Chile. The leftist coalition, headed by President Boric, won less than 30% of the vote. This is the latest chapter in Chile's effort to rewrite the country's constitution that dates back to General Augusto Pinochet. This year marks the 50th anniversary of the coup that took Pinochet to power in 1973. It's a constitution that in many people's view enshrines inequality in Chile. The 2019 protests saw millions take to the streets to demand change and a new constitution, and the following year, in 2020, 80% of Chileans voted in favour of the idea of rewriting the constitution. But it's here where the pendulum begins to swing. A leftist Constitution Council drafted a progressive and modern document that voters roundly rejected in 2022's referendum. And now voters have switched, handing power to right-wing parties. Republican Party leader Cast, who has praised General Pinochet's policies and legacy, said that with these results, Chile has defeated what he calls a failed government. President Boric, meanwhile, said they must learn from previous mistakes and draft a text that appeals to the great majority of the country.
A fire broke out deep in a gold mine in southern Peru. 24 hours later, 27 workers were reportedly killed during this overnight shift. The Yanaquiwa Mining Company says 175 workers were safely evacuated after the accident. The fire occurred about 100 meters below the surface, and government officials say they are investigating the cause. Families were taken by bus to the mine so they may wait for the bodies of their loved ones. Chile's government says 115 migrants were repatriated to Venezuela on a humanitarian flight this weekend. The migrants at the Peru and Chile border had been stranded after being denied entry into Peru. The incident sparked diplomatic tensions between the two countries as Peru sent police and soldiers to block their entry. Reportedly, some migrants have still been left in the desert as they claim they were not allowed to board the flight. A judge in Colombia condemned two brothers for their participation in the murder of Paraguayan prosecutor Marcelo Pecci. According to a statement by Colombia's Attorney General's office, both Ramon Emilio and Andrés Felipe Pérez accepted the charges voluntarily and were found guilty of aggravated homicide along with other charges in the planning, logistics, and financing of the crime. Marcelo Pecci was killed in Cartagena on the island of Barú while on honeymoon with his wife in May of 2022. And let's take a look at what stories we're following for next week. First, we are following Bolivia's efforts to solve a dollar shortage. Bolivia's Senate approved a law that will allow the government to sell up to 50% of its gold reserves to ease the internal scarcity of the US dollars. The government will be able to negotiate the sale of up to 22 tons of gold out of the almost 44 available. Bolivia's net foreign reserves dropped from a peak above $15 billion in 2014 to less than $4 billion now. Second, we are following the eruption of Guatemala's Fuego volcano. Guatemala's authorities evacuated more than 1,000 people and closed a road. The families were moved to a sports hall for shelter. The volcano, called Fuego, Spanish word for fire, was sending out pyroclastic flows, a high-temperature mix of gas, ash, and rock fragments. We will be following what is next for Central America's most active volcano. And now the answer to our news trivia. The answer is C. A year after President Nayib Bukele's declared war on gangs, a video game has been released with this theme. PCT Extracción allows players to join in on the fight against gangs in El Salvador. Released in April, the game had more than 10,000 downloads in its first week and is currently in the test phase. The war on gangs in the Central American country is far from being a game and has sent more than 67,000 suspected gang members to jail. human rights groups have criticized the massive incarceration. That's it for this week. We'll see you again soon on Latin America Now.